So what is it about New York? What brings you here, in and out of our city?
For some reason, the first time I came here, I felt at home and just drawn to it. It's probably because it's a little bit like Melbourne, the culture, the style, the people. I always feel very comfortable talking to people here. People are very friendly. I like the connections. And I think I first came back here in 1989, or came here in 1989, because I'm very old. And since then, I've tried to come back every couple of years, but because of COVID, end of travel. So I'm making up for lost time.
You're back. Now, I know you're single. Tell me about your single life. I'm thinking you love it.
I love my single life. I can't imagine sharing my home with anybody except my cat, and I'm not a crazy cat lady. I just like my own space. I never say never, but I do not want somebody moving in with me. I'm not selfish, but I like my own, as I said, my own space, my own freedom, do what I like, and I'm very comfortable living by myself. And I have a great network of friends across the age spectrum, and that suits me. So I can choose where I go and when.
And when you want company.
When I want company, there's always someone
Yes.
I can call.
Yeah.
Or I go to a cafe and sit down and have a conversation.
Oh, I love that.
Cafe culture and conversations. And connecting. It's a lot of C words.
Yes.
So it's a very similar culture, I think, in Melbourne to New York, which is why I always say this is a home away from home.
So how long have you been living on your own?
Probably, maybe 40 years now.
Yes.
So that's more than half my life on my own.
Yes.
And I wouldn't change it. And I hope that I can continue to live on my own.
Yes.
Heaven help me. The thought of going into a home with other people is just not on my agenda.
Yeah.
I just want to say one thing about getting old, that it's another of my, I don't know why, but I really like words starting with C, and that getting old actually takes courage. I think it takes courage because I certainly am aware of the culture of aging, where one is kind of, it's rammed into you that you're going to get old and things are going to get difficult, that you might need assistance, that things are going to stop working, that you might need a walking stick, you might have to go into care. All of these things are sort of out there in the ether, and it's quite hard. You really need to be, screw your courage to the sticking point. I think that's in Macbeth. So to withstand that sort of culture of aging, it does take courage, and you've got to get armed and take up arms, and that's my take on it anyway. And as long as I can keep being courageous and keep doing things, I think I'll be okay.
And you just traveled here alone.
Totally. And I feel really good about that. And I can do it. So I'm already planning to come back. The only problem is the travel insurance gets so expensive, because you are more likely as you get old to have something ghastly happen. Heaven forbid you fall over in New York. You might need to be transported home, And it's so you have to pay extra because you're old.
Yeah.
It's kind of discriminatory, really.
I agree.
But we are like cars. They don't last forever. Parts go wrong, and I understand that and I expect that. I am not the same as I was at 20, but I try to keep myself as good as I possibly can be. And doing things.
Yes.
Keep doing. Don't stop.
What is traditional, and do you buy it?
I don't buy it, and it really frustrates me that there is this image that of people of a certain age, which I guess I don't know quite where that certain age starts, but I suppose I'm probably in it. There is this culture out there that, you know, when you reach a certain age, you should look like, well, a certain image. You should wear pastels, you should become quiet, you should just fade away and, I suppose, watch television and be looked after or lead a boring life. And as far as I'm concerned, I think life continues.
And you say no to all that.
I say no to all of that. And I find it very frustrating. I do still work, and sometimes I do auditions for maybe an extra in a TV commercial.
And that started later in life?
Yes, because I've worked as a social worker all my life, probably for 45 years of doing that sort of work, and ended up with a ghastly manager, and I decided I'd had enough of it. So I thought, what else can I do? What am I interested in? Which is people, style, fashion has always interested me. So I started working in a shoe shop because I quite like shoes. And that was a bit of fun. I don't believe in retirement. I think the only time you retire is when you go to bed. It's not for me. I intend to keep working as long as I can.
And here you are, visiting our city from Australia on your own.
On my own, yes. And I have to say it's greatly restored my confidence. Like many people during the awful lockdowns that we had during COVID, and it's still around, of course, in Melbourne during the first lockdown, which seemed to go on forever, we were not allowed any visitors at all. And for single people, that's when it was difficult. It's one thing to choose to live on your own, but when you're forced to be absolutely on your own for quite a few weeks, that was pretty confronting.
Yeah.
And like many people, I did feel some degree of anxiety.
Yes.
And initially, the thought of even travelling, I felt a bit concerned about would I be able to manage it. Since I got on that plane and since I've been here, I've had absolutely no concerns and worried about anything really. My anxiety has just disappeared because I've been able to do it.
And I think to have this down, how do you live a really full life? You got some tips for us?
A full life. Keep working, keep having conversations, keep reading, keep mixing with people across a spectrum of ages. My view is that age is no barrier.
How do you feel about your inner critic? Do you have one?
I do have an inner critic, and I think the inner critic is probably too vocal sometimes, and is on repeat, and I do grapple with that actually. I think I acquired the mindset of having to get things right and be a perfectionist from my mother, and as I've said before, we didn't have a great relationship, but somehow or another I picked up her facility for having to have everything right and be the best, and I do still struggle with that. I've been trying to write some stories and I've got a lot of them in my head. I start to put things on paper and then I read it and I think, oh, it's not good enough, so I don't continue. So a friend of mine said, you know, really, it's better to get it written than to get it right. So one of the things I aim to do when I get back home is to stop so much of the inner critic, which I seem to have lost since I've been here, interestingly. So I think I'm just going to get back and feel a lot freer and try and step back from the inner critic.
Nothing like a trip.
Nothing like a trip. It's totally reinvigorated me. And
Shona, What is your life philosophy?
My life philosophy, older and bolder is my motto.
Let me
As
see
you
that.
can see,
Yeah.
I spell old with a B, or actually sometimes maybe with a G. I just, I think I believe in being visible. We're born, we become visible, we continue being visible until, well, I guess we're no longer here, and I don't intend to fade away.
What's the number one thing you wish everyone knew about sex?
That it's okay. Look, that's not really a terribly good answer. That it's not related to, well, it is related to age if you're too young, but I think the number one thing is that you're never too old, and you should never say never. But it doesn't really matter if you're not having it, as far as I'm concerned. I've certainly had a few experiences since I've been here in New York this time, and I was very, very keen to flee the room of the gentleman who had his eye on me and got me up to his suite. No, thank you. There's sex and there's sex, but I can live without it. It's okay.
That. Yes. Beyond fabulous. Tell us about your style. Whoa.
Look, my style is just me. It's innate. I think it's a little bit inherited from my grandmother. I remember looking in her wardrobe when I was quite small and being amazed by her clothes. I think style is just, it's something from within. It's not about fashion. Fashion is a trend. Style is about the person and yourself. I certainly don't follow a lot of fast fashion. I might understand it, but it's not for me. The thing I'm finding about style now is, because I have the philosophy of being visible, like a lot of older people, which I think is fantastic. But what I do find is that some of those people are actually making spectacles of themselves, because they are putting things on that they see someone else wearing who has, that is their style, but this person, maybe it isn't actually their style. So they end up looking like a clown. And I find that really quite upsetting. And I know a few women who I put into that category, which is probably judgmental, but I get so frustrated with it. And as for stylists styling up people to look like themselves, I just find that really ghastly. You are what you are, and if you've got style, you know it. You don't go and learn it or acquire it. It's there.
I'm going in on that fabulous crown you have on and that fabulous tea.
Well, queen of the bold. Well,
can you tell me something scandalous about your life? Tell me the most scandalous. Come on.
Well, this was a bit of a scandal, I guess, at the time, and even more so when I found out that it had been written about in a book, because I didn't realise how much it had sort of impacted on this person who was a famous pianist who was touring New Zealand, and I happened to know a few people in the musical world and went to the pianist's concert. And afterwards there was a sort of after party where the pianist, I don't know, maybe he should remain nameless actually, and he was a very, very large gentleman, and what I noticed about him was that he had particularly unappealing hands. They were obviously very strong hands because he played huge concertos and was quite famous for a particular, the Busoni piano concerto, but I thought, oh, I don't want those hands near me. But he became besotted with me, and I knew, well, I was in the hotel where he was staying. I didn't get into his room, but we obviously exchanged contact, and in those days there were no things like emails,
Yes.
but there were telephones. And he used to ring me from Iceland. He sent me postcards. When he left New Zealand, I had to go to his hotel where he had left me a gift. And it was ironically a couple of teaspoons which he bought from a jeweller whose shop I was working in. And of course I wasn't going to sort of have a relationship with him because he didn't appeal to me at all. I admired his piano playing, but apparently when he got back to England, he did have a wife back there. He had a terrible breakdown.
Oh.
And it was all attributed to the fact that he had met this person in New Zealand and fallen in love with this social worker, which was me.
Yes.
And I read this in a biography of the pianist, and I thought, well, this is fascinating that all this is written up there, but you know, the author didn't know me. So I actually got in touch with him, and we ended up having a phone call. So I filled him in on a bit more of the detail of the situation, and then in the next edition of the book he amended things, and I told him that the 2 teaspoons that I had been given, one of them actually bent and snapped, and I thought that that was really quite a significant moment, because in fact the pianist, well, he had a breakdown and had gone berserk when he went home.
Oh my.
All because of me. So I don't know whether that's a scandal, but look, it clearly was something
Yes.
down that track. And his wife has also written... We're right, thank you. His wife also wrote a book wherein I am mentioned. That she found out about all of this after she'd had to deal with him throwing things around their apartment, and he admitted that he had met this other person. So very exciting, really. Mentioned in dispatches.
Talk about that beige craze that was happening and this love of traditional. I'm untraditional, you?
Very untraditional. Beige, no, never. I don't do beige. I was somewhere in a store here yesterday, and it was an interior design store, and everything was tones of beige, just really ghastly. It doesn't suit me, but I just don't see. It's not really a colour. It's not in my. It's not in my rainbow. Put it that way.
And talk about traditional. How do you feel about that?
Traditional.
What is traditional? Wait a minute. I'm talking power moves here. What do you do every morning or every day that gives you your power?
Right, well that's actually really easy because where I live, I'm lucky enough to have a swimming pool on the floor below me, so I start my day every single day with a swim, and it's literally, physically, power moves,
Yes.
but it actually gets my head in the right space for the day, and if the inner critic has been nagging away there, I find I get in the water and it just kind of flows away with the water or something. It's very calming. It's like a meditation. But tell me to go and sit in my bedroom and meditate, no way. I can't do it. I'm not into that at all. But the water I find very calming. And that gives me, I guess, the power to kind of get going and get on with the day.
I love that. So when have you felt the most sexually free in your life? What decade would you say that was?
Probably way back in my 20s, I guess. It was a very different era, and I was living at home and I had a very difficult relationship with my mother, and all I wanted to do was get out because it seemed that everybody else was having a great time and were having sex and all of that, which I didn't know too much about because my mother had said it's something that you do when you get married. And I remember saying that to my first ever boyfriend. However, I broke the rules with my first ever boyfriend, and I thought, well, this is actually okay. So that was sort of began an era of being pretty sexually free, and I guess I got around, well, quite a bit. And then I realised that maybe one should sort of step back a bit, and I ended up getting married, which was probably, well, it was a mistake. 24 hours later, I thought, what the hell have I done? But I stuck it out, and for 7 years, must have been the 7-year itch or something, and I thought, never again. So it's been never again, and as far as I'm concerned, if I meet somebody, I meet somebody, but it doesn't really matter. At the moment, I'm just by myself.